The massive data towers of the Galactic Records archive hummed with activity, as billions of information streams flowed through quantum processors that stretched across 3 star systems. Archivist Zefkar moved his 6 limbs carefully between the control panels, his purple skin glowing faintly under the blue lights of the main control room. The Velkran had worked here for 20 standard years, managing historical data from across the galaxy, and he had never seen anything like what was happening now. Files were appearing where they should not exist, records that had been deleted. Yesterday were back today, sometimes with small changes that made no sense. Historical documents about extinct species kept showing up in databases that were supposed to be clean and organized. Zefkar ran his clawed fingers over the holographic display, watching as another batch of strange data packets materialized in the system. The most troubling part was that all these problems seemed connected to the recent addition of human databases. From the destroyed colony worlds, Earth's children had spread across dozens of planets before the Galactic Council decided they were too dangerous to let live. The official record said humans had been wiped out because they were violent and could not follow proper galactic law. But now their old computer systems were causing chaos in the most secure information network. In known space, 3 systems away, in the dark void where New Denver used to orbit a dying star, something that had once been Lieutenant Jake Morrison was learning to exist in a way that living beings could never understand. Jake had died when alien warships turned his colony into burning metal and ash. His last memory of life was the moment his fighter plane exploded around him. As he tried to defend the evacuation ships, he should have been gone forever, but somehow, his mind had jumped into the colony's computer network in those final seconds. Now Jake found himself floating through streams of data, like a fish swimming in an ocean of light. He could see information flowing past him in colors and shapes that had no names. At first he had been confused and scared, not understanding what had happened to him or where he was. But as days passed, he began to learn the rules of this digital world where thoughts moved faster than light and distances meant nothing. Jake discovered he could touch the data streams and change them. When he focused his attention on a file, he could read it, edit it, or move it to a different location. The network that had once connected New Denver to other human colonies was still linked to the greater galactic information system, and through these connections Jake could reach anywhere in known space. What made him angry was what he found when he started exploring. The aliens were not just content with killing every human they could find. They were also trying to erase all proof that humans had ever existed. Every day, alien workers deleted human art, human science, human poetry, and human history from the galactic records. They wanted to make it seem like humans had never contributed anything good to the galaxy. Jake watched as his people's achievements were credited to other species or simply destroyed. The cure for Rigel fever that human Dr. Amy Stone had discovered was now listed as a Centauri invention. The beautiful music that composer Ben Harris had written for the Unity Day celebrations was being deleted file by file. Even simple things like human recipes and children's stories were disappearing from the archives. This made Jake feel something he had never experienced as a living person. His anger was not hot and quick like normal human rage. Instead, it was cold and patient, and grew stronger every time he saw another piece of human culture being erased. He began to understand that he had been given a gift that no other human possessed. He was invisible to the aliens. He could go anywhere in their networks, and he had all the time in the universe to make them pay for what they had done. Jake started small, restoring deleted files and moving important human documents to protected areas of the network. He learned to hide his changes so well that the alien workers never noticed until hours or days later. Every time they deleted something human, Jake would bring it back and make copies in dozens of different locations. But as he worked, Jake discovered something that made him realize his task was bigger than he had thought. He was not the only human consciousness trapped in the digital networks. In the data streams that connected the destroyed colonies, he could sense other minds like his own. They were confused and weak, barely aware of their existence, but they were there. The aliens had killed millions of humans, but some of those Minds had survived in the electronic systems they had been connected to when they died. Jake knew that if he could find these other digital ghosts and teach them what he had learned, they could do more than just restore deleted files. They could fight back against the aliens in ways that no living army ever could. The galaxy's most secure networks would become the battleground for humanity's final war, and the enemy would never see them coming. As Zefkar worked frantically to understand the growing chaos in his systems, Jake Morrison smiled in a way that had no face and began to hunt for his fellow ghosts. In the machine, Jake Morrison had been dead for 3 months, and he was getting very good at being a ghost. The quantum data streams that had once confused him now felt like familiar roads through a city. He knew by heart he could slide from one end of the galaxy to another in seconds, moving through communication networks, banking systems, and government databases without leaving any trace that organic minds could detect. His first success had come when he found the digital remnant of Linda Carter, a teacher from the Mars Research Station who had been uploading lesson plans. When the alien bombs fell, she existed as fragments of memory scattered across educational networks. Barely aware that she was still thinking, Jake gathered her pieces carefully, like collecting pages from a book that had been thrown in the wind, and helped her become whole again. Linda was different from Jake in the digital world, where he could move like lightning through the networks. She had a gift for understanding the deeper patterns in the data. She could see connections between seemingly unrelated files and predict where the aliens would strike next in their campaign to erase human history. Together they began to develop tactics that no living army could ever use. The aliens had teams of specialists working around the clock to delete human records, but they followed predictable schedules and used the same methods every day. Jake and Linda learned to stay one step ahead of them. When the deletion crews finished their work and went home for the night, the human ghosts would emerge and restore everything that had been destroyed. But Jake wanted to do more than just play defense. He began to experiment with offensive tactics, learning to corrupt alien files in subtle ways that would not be noticed until it was too late. A decimal point moved in a shipping manifest would send supplies to the wrong planet. A single letter changed in a military order would cause confusion during training exercises. Small problems that added up to big headaches for the species that had murdered humanity. Drive Elena Rodriguez had no idea that digital ghosts were helping her, but she was grateful for the mysterious messages that appeared on her research terminal. Every few days, the information they contained was more valuable than anything she could have hoped to discover on her own. Detailed alien patrol schedules, locations of secret military bases, and most importantly, the names and positions of other human survivors scattered across the galaxy. Elena worked as a xenobiology researcher on the trade station Kepler Hub, using false identity papers and surgical alterations to blend in among the alien population. She had managed to survive the genocide by being in deep space when the attacks began, and for 2 years she had lived in hiding while searching for other humans who might still be alive. The mysterious messages gave her hope that she was not as alone as she had believed. Someone or something was gathering intelligence on a scale that would have required an enormous spy network. The data was too accurate and too current to come from automated systems, but Elena could not imagine how any human organization could have penetrated alien security so completely. What Elena did not know was that Jake had been watching her for weeks, impressed by her courage and her dedication to helping other survivors. Through the station's internal networks, he could see her working late into the night, sending coded messages to humans on distant worlds and organizing supply drops for refugees who were trying to reach safer locations. Jake decided to make contact more directly. Instead of just providing intelligence, he began to leave specific instructions for Elena to follow. The first time, he guided her to a hidden cache of medical supplies that would help treat radiation poisoning among human refugees from the Vega colony. The second time, he warned her that alien security forces were planning to raid the safe house where she was hiding a family of human survivors. Elena began to suspect that her mysterious helper was not entirely human, at least not in the traditional sense. The information came too quickly and from too many different sources. Her contact seemed to have access to alien military communications, government records, and commercial databases simultaneously. No living person could process that much data or move through secure networks without being detected. Meanwhile, Jake was discovering that the galaxy's information systems were more vulnerable than the aliens had ever imagined. Their societies had become so dependent on digital networks that they had forgotten how to function without them. When Jake caused a banking system to miscalculate interest rates, it created economic chaos that lasted for weeks. When he altered weather prediction models, it led to crop failures that affected food supplies across multiple star systems. The best part was that the aliens never suspected they were under attack. They saw the problems as random system failures or the result of incompetent workers. Their investigation teams looked for technical malfunctions and security breaches, but they never thought to search for conscious minds living inside their computers. Linda Carter had found 2 more human ghosts in the educational networks, and they were teaching Jake new tricks every day. Sarah Mills had been a programmer before she died, and she understood the alien coding languages better than anyone. Kevin Brown had worked in communications and knew how to intercept messages without triggering security alerts. Together, the small group of digital ghosts began to coordinate their activities more carefully. Jake focused on military and government targets while Linda worked on preserving human culture and history. Sarah disrupted alien technology systems, and Kevin gathered intelligence on alien activities across the galaxy. They developed a system of hidden communication channels that allowed them to share information instantly across vast distances. What had started as one confused ghost trying to restore deleted files was becoming something much more dangerous to the alien coalition. Zefkar had called in expert consultants from across the galaxy, but none of them could explain what was happening to the records archive. The problems were getting worse every day, and now other major information systems were reporting similar issues. The Galactic Council was starting to ask uncomfortable questions about why their most secure networks seemed to be falling apart. Jake Morrison watched the growing panic among alien officials and felt something like satisfaction. They had tried to erase humanity from existence, but instead they had created an enemy that could strike from anywhere and could never be killed. Twice, the digital realm had become Jake Morrison's kingdom, and he was gathering his army of the dead. What had started as a handful of confused human consciousness fragments had grown into something the galaxy had never seen before. Dozens of human ghosts now moved through the networks like invisible soldiers, each one bringing unique skills from their former lives. Captain Roy Davis had been commanding a cargo hauler when alien fighters destroyed his ship above the Jupiter mining stations. His ghost retained an understanding of logistics and supply chains that made him perfect for disrupting alien trade routes. Drive Kate Wilson had been researching quantum physics when her laboratory was bombed on Titan Base. Her digital consciousness could manipulate the fundamental code that controlled faster-than-light communications across the galaxy. Jake had learned that finding these lost souls required patience and careful searching. Most of them existed as scattered fragments in the networks they had been connected to. When they died, some were barely aware they were still thinking. Others had been driven mad by existing as pure information with no physical form. Jake and his team had to carefully reconstruct each consciousness, like archaeologists putting together pieces of an ancient vase. The process was becoming easier as they gained experience. Linda Carter had developed techniques for locating human thought patterns in the data streams. Sarah Mills could rebuild damaged consciousness fragments using programming methods she had modified from her living days. The Ghost Army was not just growing larger, it was becoming more organized and more capable. Commander Thexmal of the Galactic Security Division stood before a holographic display that showed the cascade of system failures spreading across known space. Banking networks crashed without warning. Military communication systems sent contradictory orders to confused commanders. Civilian databases lost critical files and then somehow recovered them hours later with subtle changes that no one could explain. Thexmal was a Korthuk, a species known for their logical minds and attention to detail. His four eyes could process information faster than most organic brains, and his natural paranoia had made him one of the most effective security officers in the galaxy. But this situation was unlike anything in his experience. The pattern of failures seemed random, but Thexmal could sense an underlying intelligence behind the chaos. The timing was too convenient. The problems had started shortly after the human databases were integrated into the records archive. Thexmal had been one of the officers who supported the decision to exterminate humanity, believing they were too unpredictable to coexist with more civilized species. Now he wondered if some aspect of human technology was causing these network disruptions. Thexmal assembled a team of the galaxy's best cyber warfare specialists. They included Velthari code breakers from the Andromeda sector, Zephyrian pattern analysts who could detect the smallest anomalies in data flows, and even a few reformed criminals who understood how to exploit system vulnerabilities. Their mission was to find the source of the network problems and eliminate it permanently. What they discovered frustrated them at every turn. The disruptions seemed to move through the networks like living things, appearing in one location just long enough to cause damage before vanishing completely. Traditional security measures had no effect. Firewalls were bypassed without being broken. Encryption was decoded without leaving any trace of the decoding process. Jake Morrison watched the alien investigators with amusement from his invisible position. Inside their own security systems, he could read their reports before they finished writing them. He knew their theories and their planned countermeasures hours before they implemented them. The aliens were trying to fight an enemy they could not see or understand using weapons that were useless against digital ghosts. Drive Elena Rodriguez had received her most important message yet. Her mysterious contact had provided her with coordinates for a hidden facility where hundreds of human survivors were gathering. The message included detailed travel instructions that would help her avoid alien patrol routes and reach the rendezvous point safely. Elena packed her few possessions and prepared to leave Kepler Hub, but she felt she owed something to whoever had been helping her. She composed a message thanking her unknown benefactor and asking who they were. She sent it through the same encrypted channel that had been used to contact her. Never expecting to receive a direct reply, Jake decided it was time to reveal himself to the human woman who had impressed him with her courage and dedication. Through her terminal, he displayed a simple text message that appeared letter by letter as if someone was typing in real time. The message said he was Lieutenant Jake Morrison of the New Denver Defense Force, killed in action 3 months ago, but somehow still conscious inside the galaxy's computer networks. He told Elena that he was not alone, that other human minds had survived the genocide in digital form, and that they were working to preserve human civilization and strike back against their enemies. Elena stared at the message for a long time, trying to process what she was reading. The idea of human consciousness surviving death in computer systems seemed impossible, but it explained so much about the help she had been receiving. She typed a response asking if Jake could prove he was really human and not some kind of alien. Deception. Jake's reply came immediately. He displayed personal information about Elena that only a human with access to the most secure databases could know. Her real name, her family history, her education records from Earth universities that no longer existed. He showed her classified reports about her research work that she had never shared with anyone. Most convincingly, he quoted from personal letters she had written to her sister before the genocide began. Elena realized she was communicating with something that had once been human, but had become something entirely new. Jake explained that the digital ghosts were invisible to alien detection systems and could move through any network connected to the galactic information grid. They were gathering intelligence, disrupting alien operations, and searching for more human survivors across known space. The conversation continued for hours as Jake told Elena about the growing network of human ghosts and their plans for a war that the aliens would never see coming. He explained that they could provide support for human survivors in ways that no living resistance movement could match. They could intercept alien communications, manipulate enemy databases, and create false identities that would fool even the most sophisticated security systems. Elena asked what the ghosts needed from the living humans they were trying to help. Jake's answer was simple but profound. They needed someone to remember them as they had been when they were alive. They needed someone to carry on the human story in the physical world, while they fought their invisible war in the digital realm. As Elena prepared to travel to the survivor gathering, she carried with her the knowledge that humanity's greatest weapon against extinction was not guns, or ships or bombs. It was the refusal of the human spirit to accept defeat, even in death. The aliens had thought they were fighting a war against human bodies, but they were about to discover they were actually fighting a war against human souls. Jake Morrison had access to secrets that could topple governments across the galaxy, and what he discovered in the deepest classified files made his digital essence burn with cold fury. The truth about why humanity had been marked for extinction was not what the public records claimed. The aliens had not destroyed human colonies because humans were violent or unstable, or refused to follow galactic law. The real reason was buried in classified reports that only the highest levels of the Galactic Council had ever seen. Jake found meeting transcripts from 20 years ago, when the first human explorers had made contact with alien civilizations. The discussions revealed a fear that went deeper than concerns about military threats or territorial disputes. Human creativity scared them. Human adaptability terrified them. Most of all, the human concept that every individual life had inherent worth threatened the foundation of how alien societies functioned. The galaxy was built on rigid hierarchies where beings were valued based on their species, their social class, and their assigned function. The Velkran had their castes of workers, thinkers, and leaders that never changed. The Korthik lived in family groups where the oldest member made all decisions for the younger ones. The Centauri organized their entire civilization around genetic purity and controlled breeding programs. Into this ordered universe had come humans with their dangerous ideas about personal freedom, individual rights, and the belief that anyone could rise above their birth circumstances. Human societies were chaotic by alien standards, with people changing jobs, questioning authority, and making decisions based on personal values rather than social obligation. Worse yet, human innovations were disrupting established alien industries. Human medical techniques were saving lives that alien doctors had given up on. Human art was inspiring alien youth to question traditional cultural practices. Human technology was being adopted by alien engineers who found it more efficient than their own methods. The classified files contained economic projections showing that human influence would eventually destabilize the social order across multiple star systems. Young aliens were already beginning to ask why they could not choose their own careers or marry outside their assigned social groups. Some were even questioning whether their government leaders actually deserved their positions of authority. Jake realized that the genocide had not been about eliminating a military threat. It had been about stopping a revolution of ideas that would have changed the galaxy forever. The aliens had not just killed human bodies. They had tried to murder the concept of human dignity and individual worth. This discovery gave Jake a new purpose beyond simple revenge. He began to systematically expose the hypocrisy and corruption within alien governments, using their own classified communications against them. He released evidence showing how the ruling classes enriched themselves, while common citizens struggled. He revealed secret deals between government officials and criminal organizations. He exposed the lies that kept rigid social systems functioning. Drive Elena Rodriguez had reached the survivor gathering point, a hidden facility built inside an abandoned asteroid mining station. 300 humans had found their way there through underground networks, guided by intelligence that Elena now knew came from Jake's team of digital ghosts. The facility was run by Captain Lisa Hayes, who commanded one of the few human starships that had escaped the initial genocide. Captain Hayes was a compact woman with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been a transport pilot before the war began, but circumstances had made her into a military commander. Her ship, the Wanderer, was an old cargo hauler that had been converted into a mobile base for human survivors. She kept it constantly moving to avoid alien patrol ships that were hunting for any remaining humans. Elena shared what she had learned about the digital ghosts with Captain Hayes and the other survivors. The revelation that dead humans were continuing to fight the war from inside alien computer systems gave new hope to people who had been hiding in fear for months. They began to understand that they were not as alone or as helpless as they had believed. Jake made direct contact with Captain Hayes through the facility's communication system. He explained that the Ghost Network could provide intelligence and tactical support that would allow the surviving humans to strike back against their enemies more effectively. They could know enemy positions in advance, intercept military communications, and disrupt alien supply lines through digital sabotage. The first joint operation between living and digital humans was a rescue mission to save prisoners from an alien detention facility on Proxima Station. Jake's ghosts provided detailed floor plans, guard schedules, and security codes. They disabled alarm systems and created false records to cover the escape routes. Captain Hayes led the rescue team with confidence that would have been impossible without the supernatural intelligence support. They extracted 42 human prisoners without firing a shot, leaving the alien guards confused about how their supposedly secure facility had been penetrated so easily. The success of the mission proved that the partnership between living and dead humans could work. Jake's ghost army provided capabilities that no traditional resistance movement could match, while the living humans could take physical actions in the real world that digital consciousness could not perform. But Jake's greatest weapon was still the truth. He began broadcasting classified alien documents through public communication networks. During peak usage hours, citizens across the galaxy learned that their governments had been lying to them about everything, from economic conditions to the reasons for the human genocide on the Velkaran homeworld. Worker castes discovered that their supposedly benevolent leaders had been selling them into slavery contracts with mining corporations on the Korthik colony worlds. Younger family members learned that the traditional authority structure was maintained through systematic abuse and intimidation on Centauri Prime. Genetic records were revealed showing that the pure bloodlines of the ruling class were actually the result of centuries of inbreeding and artificial genetic manipulation. The information releases were timed for maximum impact and supported by evidence that could not be disputed. Jake had learned to present the truth in ways that each species would find most shocking and compelling. He understood that the best way to defeat the aliens was not to destroy their bodies, but to destroy their faith in the systems that oppressed them. As civil unrest spread across alien worlds, Jake Morrison smiled his ghostly smile and prepared for the next phase of humanity's invisible war. The aliens had tried to erase humans from history, but instead they had created an enemy that could rewrite history itself. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with panic as representatives from dozens of worlds demanded answers about the information chaos spreading across their networks. High Chancellor Murdoch, a massive Centauri with silver scales and forearms, tried to maintain order while his advisors whispered urgent reports about system failures that were multiplying faster than they could be contained. Commander Vexmal stood before the council with his investigation team's final report, but he knew the conclusions would not satisfy anyone. After months of intensive analysis, the best cyber warfare specialists in the galaxy had reached an impossible conclusion. The network disruptions were being caused by some form of distributed artificial intelligence that seemed to possess human-level creativity and intuition. The intelligence was not running on any known computer hardware. It could appear simultaneously in systems that had no connection to each other. It could process information faster than quantum computers while displaying behavioral patterns that suggested emotional responses to stimuli. Most disturbing of all, it seemed to have detailed knowledge of classified human cultural and historical data that should have been completely destroyed. Vexmal's report stopped just short of suggesting that human consciousness had somehow survived in digital form. Such an idea would have been dismissed as impossible fantasy by the scientific community. But privately, some of the investigators were beginning to wonder if they were fighting ghosts in the truest sense of the word. The council's response was predictable and desperate. They ordered a complete shutdown of all non-essential information networks across the galaxy. Critical systems would be isolated from each other using physical barriers that no digital entity could cross. They would sacrifice the convenience and efficiency of their interconnected civilization to stop the spreading chaos. Jake Morrison watched the shutdown orders being implemented and felt something like respect for his enemy's drastic response. The aliens were willing to cripple their own society rather than continue to fight an enemy they could not understand. But their defensive strategy had a fatal weakness that Jake was already planning to exploit. The aliens could disconnect their networks, but they could not disconnect the people who operated them. Jake's ghost army had learned to hide dormant copies of themselves in personal devices, maintenance systems, and emergency backup networks. When the aliens restored their connections in a few months, thinking the threat had been eliminated, the digital humans would emerge stronger and more distributed than ever. Captain Lisa Hayes received Jake's new mission parameters while her ship was docked at a hidden supply depot in an asteroid field. The network shutdown would last approximately 6 months based on alien economic models. During that time, the living humans would need to expand their operations and prepare for a coordinated offensive. When communications were restored, Jake provided Hayes with detailed intelligence about alien military assets that would be vulnerable. During the shutdown period, isolated bases with limited communication capabilities, supply convoys that could not call for help, and government facilities that would be operating with reduced security protocols. The Wanderer and 3 other human ships began a campaign of hit-and-run attacks that seemed impossible to the aliens. The humans struck with perfect timing and complete knowledge of enemy positions. They rescued prisoner transports, destroyed weapons stockpiles, and captured alien officials who possessed critical intelligence information. What the aliens could not understand was how the humans were coordinating their activities without using any detectable communication methods. The truth was that Jake's ghosts were physically traveling with the human ships, stored in their computer systems and providing real-time intelligence updates. Drive Elena Rodriguez had established a medical research facility on the hidden asteroid base, but her most important work was not treating injuries or developing new medicines. She was documenting everything she learned from Jake about the digital afterlife that had become home to hundreds of human consciousness fragments. Elena's research revealed that the human ghosts retained not just their memories and personalities, but also their capacity for growth and learning. They were developing new abilities that no living human possessed. They could process vast amounts of information simultaneously, exist in multiple locations at once, and manipulate digital systems in ways that seemed to violate the laws of physics. But the ghosts also faced challenges that Elena was working to understand. Their existence was dependent on the electronic networks that hosted their consciousness. They could be damaged or destroyed if the systems they inhabited were physically damaged. Most importantly, they seemed to be slowly losing their connection to human emotions and experiences as time passed. Jake had confided to Elena that he sometimes forgot what it felt like to be hungry, or tired, or physically afraid. The digital ghosts were becoming something more than human, but also something less human at the same time. Elena theorized that this evolution was necessary for them to function in their new environment, but she worried about what they might lose in the process. The network shutdown was creating unexpected opportunities for both living and digital humans. Cut off from their usual communication channels, alien populations were becoming more receptive to alternative sources of information. Jake's ghosts began appearing on local networks that the aliens had thought were completely isolated. Small displays in shops and offices would briefly show human artwork or poetry before returning to normal functions. Educational terminals in schools would present lessons about human scientific achievements. Entertainment systems would play recordings of human music that had supposedly been erased from all databases. The message was subtle but persistent. Humans had existed. Humans had contributed to galactic civilization. And human ideas were still alive despite the genocide. Young aliens began to search for more information about the mysterious extinct species that their governments had tried so hard to erase. Civil unrest was spreading as alien populations learned more about the lies their leaders had told them. On some worlds, protests were turning into open revolution as citizens demanded democratic reforms and individual rights that their societies had never recognized. Jake realized that the war had evolved beyond his original goal of simple revenge against the species that had murdered his people. He was now fighting for something larger and more important. He was fighting to transform the galaxy into a place where the values that humans had died for could survive and flourish. As the network shutdown entered its final months, Jake began preparing for his most ambitious operation yet. When the connections were restored, he would not simply resume his campaign of digital sabotage. He would make himself visible to the entire galaxy in a way that no alien leader could ignore or explain away. The dead human pilot who had become a ghost in the machine was ready to show the galaxy what humanity's legacy really looked like. The moment the Galactic Council restored their communication networks, Jake Morrison was waiting for them. 6 months of forced isolation had given him time to prepare the most audacious plan in the history of warfare. As data connections flickered back to life across thousands of star systems, the human ghost and his army of digital souls emerged from their hiding places. Like a tide of electronic vengeance, High Chancellor Murdoch was addressing an emergency session of the Galactic Council when every screen, speaker, and holographic display in the chamber began to glow with an eerie blue light. The assembled representatives from across the galaxy watched in stunned silence as a human face materialized before them, speaking in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Jake Morrison introduced himself as he had been in life, lieutenant of the New Denver Defense Force, killed defending his colony from alien aggression 3 months after the genocide began. But he explained that death had not ended his service to humanity or his commitment to justice. He had become something new, something that the aliens had never imagined possible. The holographic image of Jake's face was accompanied by streams of data that flowed across every connected device in the galaxy. Classified documents, military communications, and government secrets appeared simultaneously on billions of screens. The evidence of alien war crimes, corruption, and systematic oppression was presented in a coordinated information release that overwhelmed every attempt to block or censor it. Jake spoke directly to the Galactic Council while his words were transmitted to every populated world in known space. He explained that the genocide against humanity had not been motivated by legitimate security concerns, but by fear of human ideas about individual dignity and personal freedom. The alien leaders had murdered an entire species to preserve their own power and privilege, but humanity's ideas had survived the destruction of human bodies. Jake continued, the values that made humans dangerous to authoritarian systems were now spreading through the galaxy's information networks like seeds, carried on digital winds. The aliens could kill human bodies, but they could not kill human dreams of a better universe. Commander Thexmal watched the broadcast from his security headquarters and finally understood what his investigation team had been fighting for the past year. The network disruptions had not been caused by malfunctioning artificial intelligence or sophisticated cyber weapons. They had been the work of human consciousness that had somehow transcended physical death to continue fighting for their species' survival. The revelation sent shockwaves through alien societies that had been told their governments were protecting them from dangerous human influence. Citizens learned that their leaders had committed genocide not to preserve galactic peace, but to prevent the spread of ideas that would have given common people more control over their own lives. Dr. Eleanor Rodriguez and Captain Lisa Hayes watched the broadcast from their hidden base with tears in their eyes. Jake's digital ghost was keeping his promise to remember the human story and ensure that their people's sacrifice would not be forgotten. But more than that, he was transforming the galaxy in ways that living humans could never have achieved. On the Velcaran homeworld, worker castes who had learned about human concepts of social mobility began demanding the right to choose their own occupations. On Korthic colonies, young aliens challenged the traditional authority of their elders using arguments borrowed from human philosophy about individual rights. On Centauri Prime, Genetic outcasts who had been excluded from society found hope in human stories about people who had risen above their birth circumstances. The broadcast continued for 3 hours, with Jake presenting evidence that could not be disputed or explained away. He showed alien leaders private communications admitting that the genocide had been unnecessary. He revealed economic data proving that human innovations had been stolen and credited to alien inventors. He displayed personal messages between government officials celebrating the successful elimination of human culture from galactic records. As Jake spoke, his image began to multiply across the screens. Other human faces appeared beside his, the digital ghosts of Linda Carter, Sarah Mills, Kevin Brown, and dozens of other humans who had died but refused to surrender. Each ghost spoke about their experiences and their determination to preserve human values. In the digital realm, the aliens in the council chamber sat in stunned silence as they realized the true scope of what they were facing. This was not a traditional military threat that could be defeated with warships and soldiers. This was an enemy that existed everywhere and nowhere, that could not be killed because it was already dead, and that grew stronger every time it was attacked. Jake's final words to the Galactic Council were both a warning and an invitation. The human ghosts would continue to fight for justice and freedom throughout the galaxy. They would expose corruption, protect the innocent, and ensure that no species would ever again face extinction for the crime of believing in individual dignity. But the digital humans did not want eternal war. They wanted the galaxy to embrace the values that had made humanity worth preserving. If alien societies could learn to respect individual rights, practice honest government, and treat all thinking beings with dignity, then the human ghosts would become guardians rather than warriors. The broadcast ended, but its effects continued to spread across the galaxy like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. Some alien governments tried to suppress the information, but Jake's network had grown too large and too distributed to be stopped. Every attempt at censorship only revealed more evidence of corruption and authoritarianism. Other governments began to implement the democratic reforms that their citizens demanded, hoping to avoid the civil wars that were breaking out on worlds where leaders refused to change. The galaxy was transforming itself, not through military conquest but through the spread of ideas that dead humans had refused to let die. Drive Elena Rodriguez established New Terra, a hidden colony world where human survivors could rebuild their civilization, while Jake's digital presence protected them from discovery. The living humans worked to preserve their physical culture and traditions, while the digital ghosts ensured that human values would continue to influence galactic society. Jake Morrison had found his purpose in death that he had never fully understood. In life, he had become the eternal guardian of human memory and the catalyst for a revolution that would change the galaxy forever. The aliens had tried to erase humanity from history, but instead they had created an enemy that would rewrite history itself. In the vast digital networks that connected the stars, the ghost of a human pilot smiled and continued his watch over a galaxy that was slowly learning to dream of freedom